I made every single Rotom, but will they actually work as appliances? You know, Rotom could actually be kind of like a mascot for this channel. I mean, it's a Pokemon that surrounds itself around existing technology and becomes something completely new. And yeah, that's basically half of what I do on this channel, so why not make every single Rotom form for a video? I could think of a few reasons. Regardless, the plan here is to make every battle Rotom form. Standard, Fan, Heat, Frost, Mow, and Wash. I will not be making any of the non-battle forms like Dex, PC, Phone, Drone, or Bike. For now, at least.
Okay, so first, let's go over all the appliances I bought. For standard Rotom, we're gonna turn it into a charger, and I have this basic run-of-the-mill battery bank we can use. For fan Rotom, it's also pretty straightforward. I bought this USB fan. I'll have to paint the blades since they're supposed to be black, but that shouldn't be too big of an issue. For Rotom Frost, I bought this mini USB-powered fridge. However, I wanted it to have 2 doors, so I bought another one and glued the hinge on backwards. We'll see how long that lasts. For Heat Rotom, I bought this Dash mini oven. Its size and form factor is pretty nice, but I'm gonna have to figure out what to do for the top and the bottom because any 3D printed material that touches this thing is gonna melt. It's also baby blue, so I'm gonna have to figure out a way to paint this thing. For Rotom Mow, I bought this weed whacker that can convert into handheld mode. Still, I think I'm gonna have to completely take this thing apart and rework it to Rotom Mow's form factor, and the reviews on Amazon were pretty bad, so I don't have high hopes for this one. And finally for Rotom Wash, I stumbled upon this thing. It's a $30 collapsible portable washing machine. Obviously, the issues are how big it is, and the drainage goes out the back when it should be going out the side. It's safe to say I definitely have my work cut out for this one. Now, you may think that's all of them, but there's actually one final secret Rotom, and you've been staring at it the whole time. I know some of you may have noticed that this isn't the same workbench from yesteryear, because for 2024, I've decided to upgrade my working space to the FlexiSpot E7. I was tired of hunching over my desk anytime I needed to solder or put things together, so thankfully FlexiSpot reached out to save the day and my back. Putting everything together was quick and simple with their easy to follow instructions, and the wire organizer even snaps in place with magnets. And you know, of all people, I really appreciate that.
I like it.
I chose this bamboo top since it would be stronger than the average wood for all the shenanigans I get up to, but there are many options and styles you can choose to fit your own needs. With 4 programmable buttons, it makes it really easy to change into a standing position with just a single press. And even when it's up this high, it's super sturdy. I set my printer to ludicrous speed here, and this water glass is barely moving at all. It can also hold over 350 pounds, so I can hop up here and spend some quality time with my printing son. I also have the sturdy drawer accessory that's been helping me keep things together during this project. And so, I present you with the first Rotom of the video, Rotom Desk, which on the grading scale, I'm happy to say is going straight into S tier. Now, if you want to get your own E7 or E7 Pro, check out FlexiSpot.com in the description. Alright, so starting with the standard Rotom, the first thing I did was borrow this model from fill in the blank. Then after increasing the polygon count in Blender, I upscaled it so it'd be able to actually hold the battery bank. I also modified the Thunderbolt wings a little bit so I could add the inner white shapes to it. And yeah, one square size hole later, the body's good to go. Okay, now that we have everything printed out, I'm just gonna sand off the top a bit because it's a bit rough around the edges. And I'm gonna try PLA Gloop for the first time, and hopefully that will make everything adhere really well. A few coats of spray paint later, and all I have to do is stick on the eyes and glue the back into place. And as you would expect, it can sure charge a phone. But if we're gonna rate this, I do like how it looks, and it does technically function, but it's a bit on the simplistic side, so I'm gonna put it into B tier. Designing Fan Rotom was pretty simple. I just slapped together a bunch of basic shapes while referencing the original model, and the only tricky part were these curly sides, which I just pulled the tail from a Meowth model. You can debate the ethics of that in the comments. Now while everything's printing, let's free the fan from the frame, and one paint job later, and 2 paint jobs later, we are ready for assembly. Now some of you might be thinking, how is this going to be an effective fan if it's just going to roll everywhere? Well, I actually designed a hole in the bottom to screw in a suction cup, and now bam, it can stick anywhere. Now all we have to do is plug into Rotom Desk's USB port and try it out. And yeah, it really is an effective fan. Oh wait, I forgot the little cone in the front. Alright, now it's perfect. Now to put it on the scale, I think the design and the functionality are both fantastic. so it's gonna shoot straight into S tier. For Frost Rotom, everything kind of comes together like Lego pieces. We have the slots for the 2 mini fridges right here, and then we just lock it in place with all the other pieces. And then finally we have the 2 Thunderbolts on the side, which hopefully can be held up by 2 mini magnets. Oh, and I also want to make sure there's proper ventilation, so there's a hole in the back and a hole in the bottom as well for the fans. Alright, time for another assembly. And thankfully the magnets were just strong enough to hold the lightning bolts. But how will it perform when we put it to the test? Well, unfortunately opening the doors is not the easiest task. I could have designed this with a bit more clearance in mind. But after loading in 2 Cokes, I'm going to plug this into Rotom Desk and also the standard Rotom because, well, they run off separate power. I checked in on it a few times, but it didn't seem to completely chill the can until about 17 minutes or so. But after cracking open the cold one, I can safely say it did its job. Aesthetically, really happy with how this turned out. Functionality-wise, while it did chill the cans, the doors are a bit problematic, especially with the one I had to re-glue on. So I think I can safely put this into A tier. For Rotom Heat, this thing can get up to 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and there's not a single 3D printable plastic in the world that's going to withstand that. So I had to think a bit outside the box by making a box. See, instead of using plastic, I had the idea of using orange silicone instead. So this plastic box is acting as a mold and should produce a shape like this loaf of bread up here. I also will be printing out 4 of these, which should fit around the feet of the oven. Finally, I designed its arms so I could thread some wire through it. This way, the arms will be able to be a safe distance away from the heat. Alright, first things first, it's time to disassemble the oven. And yeah, this front panel is not coming off, so I think I'm gonna have to mummify the rest of this thing in painter's tape. And again, since this thing's gonna heat up to 400 degrees, I went ahead and bought this heat-resistant paint, which should get the job done. While I wait for the paint to dry, I'm gonna go ahead and mix up this silicone concoction. And while I poured everything into the mold, it kind of felt like I was working with that Nickelodeon logo slime in real life. And yeah, things got a little messy while I was pouring into the foot molds, but one day later, everything seemed good to go. However, I've made a huge mistake. I forgot to grease everything up with Vaseline, so I'm gonna have to cut everything out. And as I plopped my orange loaf of silicone onto the table, it seemed to be pretty solid, but the top was still a bit slimy. I think that's also on me for not mixing it good enough. And I forgot to show it on camera, but the feet actually came out great. Now we'll just stick on the face, reassemble the oven, and plop everything into place. Now the orange colors don't exactly match each other perfectly, but you make do with what you have. I also tied some jewelry wire around the screws in the back, and while I wanted to twist and contort the arms in any shape I wanted, it just wasn't strong enough to hold, unfortunately. So this is the final result. But what's gonna happen when I put it to the test?
That actually does look like a Pokeball going in. That next bite, that middle bite with just the bulgogi was not bad.
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Binging with Big Rig, where today we're going to attempt to make the Pokeball pizza from Domino's in my mini Rotom oven. Thankfully, we have everything we need to know about this pizza due to a marketing write-up, where apparently the top is red sauce and pepperoni, the bottom half is truffle sauce and ricotta, and the middle outline is bulgogi beef. So let's get things started off with our bulgogi beef marinade. We'll start with 3 tablespoons of soy sauce, a healthy tablespoon of sesame seeds, a teaspoon of black pepper, 2 tablespoons of sesame seed oil, 2 garlic cloves finely chopped, and a 1/4 cup of chopped green onions. And I don't have what is known as an Asian pear on hand, but I do have some honey to still sweeten up the pot. I should have added some brown sugar as well, but that's neither here or there. Next, we're going to chop up this flank steak into as thin slices as possible, and now we're going to really mix this into the marinade, allowing all the flavors to really get to know each other. Now we're going to allow this to marinate for at least 2 hours. While that's happening, we're going to go ahead and make our white truffle sauce. Now that sounds really fancy, but it's as simple as taking a cup of heavy whipping cream, 2 tablespoons of truffle butter, which is easier to find than I thought, a tablespoon of black pepper, and a 1/4 cup of Parmesan cheese. Now all we need to do is stir this over medium heat in a saucepan for about 5 to 10 minutes. And when the marinade is done and all the flavors have become best friends, we can sear it in our pan for about 3 to 4 minutes. And because this is a mini Binging with Big Rig, I just got pre-made pizza dough. Please don't be too hard with your judgment. And after taking 20 minutes to remember how to form a dough circle, we're ready to apply our truffle sauce on one half, standard pizza sauce on the other, then covering it all up with mozzarella cheese. We'll then put a couple pepperonis on top, then make our Pokeball outline with tiny strips of bulgogi. And it was at this moment I realized how much beef was actually being put on the pizza in comparison to how much beef I actually made. Regardless, we're going to finish this off by dolloping the bottom half in the center with ricotta cheese, and we're finally ready for the star of the show. Let's see if this Rotom will work its magic, or if we'll have a literal kitchen meltdown. After 15 minutes in the oven, the colors look good, so it seemed ready to go. And I do have to say, aesthetically it looks pretty dang good, but in the world of food, taste should always trump aesthetics. So we're going to split this in half and try it out with the roommate.
I'm not used to ricotta cheese on a pizza, but that's pretty yummy. And you cooked that in here.
Yep, I did.
Good pizza. I'm proud of you, even though you're sticky.
So yes, while it might be sticky on the top, and the orange colors are a bit mismatched, it really did save the day by cooking a dang good pizza. So I think B tier is where it belongs. Okay, so for Rotom Mow, first things first, I'm gonna have to take this thing apart. And wow, this is as cheap and as simple as it could possibly get. 6 AA batteries powers this mini motor, and the on switch just completes the circuit by pressing down this button. Thankfully, this shouldn't be too difficult to design around. So thankfully, the basic design of Rotom Mow is just a bunch of basic shapes stacked on top of each other. But if we peek under the hood here, we can see I have a little slot here for the motor, and I should be able to weave up some wires to this buttonhole on the top. Okay, now that everything's printed out, we'll give it a couple sprays of paint, and I got the electronics all hooked up. The mini weed whacker actually came with zip ties of all things as its blades, so I tried to upgrade it a bit by using some leftover TPU I had. And no, that's not a mini explosive down there, it's just a 9-volt battery I hastily taped into a AA holder. I put some ball bearing rollers in the middle of the wheels so it could actually roll around. And we'll put on the finishing touches and test this thing out. As you've seen throughout the video, the whole yard's been covered in snow. So I'm gonna attempt to prune and trim off some of the leaves from my very alive and very healthy plant, Marco Prime.
We'll be fine. This will be fine. It'll be fine. Alright, pressing the button.
30 seconds of spinning later, and it couldn't even prune a single dead leaf. And to be fair, out of all the appliances, this is the one I expected to fail. Oh yeah, and I forgot to put the trimming collector in the back, and yeah, while it looks pretty decent, nothing's gonna save this from F tier. And finally, we get to Rotom Wash, and man, was this a doozy. The top part is just a solid chunk with a hole cut in the middle to hold that black plastic cap. The body is completely hollowed out, and it should be big enough where I should have some flexibility with the portable washing machine. I also designed this series of tubes to redirect the water from the back to the side, and I designed the front door to have a little hinge I can screw onto the front. Let me tell you, this took an entire week just to print out. And it took me a few hours to assemble everything together as well. There were parts I had to Dremel, sand, and even fill in some gaps with my new 3D pen. But when it was finally in an acceptable, assembled state, I got to spraying it down and putting on the final touches. Oh, also the hose it came with was way too dinky, so I beefed it up with a bigger one. And thankfully, after all that effort, the washing machine still fits into place. Unfortunately, I realized that the water doesn't release due to pressure or anything, so this tube is purely aesthetic. But let's see what happens when we put some actual clothes into it. I'm gonna test with this worn sock, and oh no, I got Coke all over my crotch. Whatever am I gonna do? So I'm gonna fill it up with water, pop a Tide Pod in there, and hit the 10-minute button, I guess.
Shut it. And we pray for the best. Look like he's rumbling a little bit. I don't think we can leave him unsupervised.
Yeah, after finding a position that actually worked, thankfully the rest of the cycle finished without a hitch. Now, according to the internet, I need to do a second cycle to get the soap out, so we're gonna run for another 10 minutes, and this time it ran without any issues. Unfortunately, after wringing them out, I still had to run it through my clothes dryer multiple times. And here's the results. The sock came out totally fine, and even though it still had a strong scent of Tide Pod, I'm gonna give this a passing grade. And with the sweatpants, it did remove all the Coke, but man, this thing is still kind of wet after 2 cycles in the dryer. I don't know really how I could remedy this. So yeah, even though I am proud I was able to actually make this thing, and it did technically get the job done, I still think with all the hiccups, it's gonna belong in C tier. So these are my final ratings, but you can feel free to rank them yourself in the comments.
Now wait, before we finish, I want to do a quick shout out to some of the people who are making some really cool projects and sharing them on my Discord. Like this shiny version of the Rock'n'Rolla pencil sharpener, or these Pokemon that were made by casting them in real gold. If you want to check out these projects or share your own, you can click the link in the description to join the Discord. And if you're a member of the Lab Scientist tier on Patreon, you can access the 3D Printing Help channel, where I can help you with projects from this channel or your own 3D print projects. And speaking of patrons,
Special thanks to my executive level patrons: Jameson Zabalos, Marco Carini, Evan Timmerman, Pow Pow, Don Nako, Joe Schmidt, Zebra Mang, and finally, Sally and Dave.